Hello, everyone. Welcome back to today's story. In this episode, while James is still stuck in Cambodia with no contact, Diep faces pregnancy, fear, and danger all alone. And the person threatening her isn't a stranger. It's Phat, who is being pushed by a heartbreaking reason, his sick mother, and the cruel deal he accepted from James's father. As Diep struggles to protect her unborn child and care for little Nai, she must also confront the painful truth behind this web of betrayal. Will James ever find out what's happening back home? Stay with us until the end, because today's episode is full of emotion, suspense, and the quiet strength of a woman fighting for her family. And don't forget to subscribe to help us reach 10,000 subscribers. Your support truly means the world to us. Late afternoon sunlight melts into gold, spilling across the water spinach patch as Diep bends over the field, her hands slow and careful. Sweat gathers along her brow, sliding down her sun-browned cheeks in thin, shimmering trails. She moves with the practiced rhythm of someone who has survived far too many days alone. Behind her, the high grass rustles, and little Nai bursts forward, hopping from mound to mound, her skirt splattered with mud, and her laughter ringing like tiny bells across the wide open field. Auntie Diep! Auntie Diep! Nai twirls, arms open wide as if embracing the whole sky. Will Uncle James come play with me today? The question slices right through Diep's heart like a sharp blade. She pauses, hand hovering above a tender green shoot. For a moment, she doesn't breathe. Then she turns, schooling her face into a soft smile, the kind mothers use when protecting a child from truths too heavy for little shoulders. Not yet, sweetheart, she murmurs, brushing stray strands of hair from Nai's damp forehead. Uncle James is still very busy, but he'll come home soon. Nai wrinkles her nose, her tiny eyebrows scrunching. But he hasn't come for days and days. Diep forces a gentle chuckle. 1 or 2 more days, okay? Then he'll come back, I promise. But it is a promise she doesn't know she can keep. James is still in Cambodia, still out of reach, still trapped in a distance that feels larger and colder every single night. Diep pulls Nai into her arms, squeezing her tightly as if that alone could keep the world from falling apart. The scent of sun-warmed grass clings to the child's hair, and for a fleeting second, Diep closes her eyes, wishing she could stay in this small bubble of innocence forever, where James is safe, where her pregnancy isn't a growing secret beneath her loose shirt, and where a man named Phat isn't lurking in the shadows, because only she knows the truth. Phat has been following her, watching her, pressuring her to leave James. And worst of all, she knows why. Phat's mother is sick, terribly sick. Hospital bills piling higher each day, doctors demanding payments that Phat can't afford. In desperation, the young man accepted money from James's father. Money that came with a single cruel condition: keep Diep away from James, break them apart, do whatever it takes. And Phat, trapped between fear and survival, obeyed. Now, Diep is left to shoulder everything alone. As the breeze sweeps through the field, rustling the leaves in a whisper that sounds almost mocking, Diep tightens her arms around Nai. The world feels unbearably wide, and she feels unbearably small. By the time they return to the house, dusk has settled. The faint crackling of the cooking fire seeps through the doorway, filling the kitchen with the smoky fragrance of braised fish and lemongrass. Diep sets the bowls on the table, her hands steady even though her heart trembles. Nee sits with her legs dangling off the chair, staring blankly at her rice. "Eat, baby," Diep coaxes softly, scooping soup and blowing on it until the steam fades. "Here, have some meat." Nai turns her face away. "It doesn't taste good," she whispers, voice wobbling. "Not without Uncle James." Then, suddenly, she erupts into tears, loud, heart-splitting, shaking sobs. Diep rushes forward, cradling the child against her shoulder. "Baby, don't cry." "Shh, be good. Just one bowl, okay? Uncle James will be so proud of you." But as she says his name, her throat closes and tears spill down her cheeks, uninvited. She presses her lips to Nai's hair, swallowing a sob, trying to be strong for the child who clings to her with all the trust in the world. Soon the fire burns low. The rice grows cold. Outside, crickets fill the night with their slow, mournful rhythm. Diep wipes her eyes, forces a smile, and reaches for her phone. "Let's call Uncle James," she whispers. Nai's eyes brighten instantly. She scoots closer, hands gripping Diep's sleeve like she's grabbing the last piece of hope in the dark. Diep dials the number she's memorized by heart. James's number. The one that once brought laughter into this home. 1 ring, 2 rings, 3. But then, "The subscriber you have dialed is currently unavailable." The words hit like a hammer. Diep's breath catches. Her knuckles whiten around the chipped phone. Nai looks up, lip trembling. He's busy, right?" Diep nods stiffly. "Yes, very busy." But the truth is unbearable. He hasn't answered for days. Not once. She ends the call quickly, before her hands can shake any harder. The beep echoes through the silent house, sharp and merciless. Nai bows her head and cries quietly into her half-eaten rice. Diep hugs her again, letting the child soak her dress with tears. What she doesn't tell Nai is that James might not even know what danger she faces now. That Phat has cornered her more than once, voice trembling not with anger, but with guilt. That he's begged her to leave James for everyone's sake. For his mother's medicine, for James's father's demands, for some twisted belief that forcing Diep away might protect her from something darker brewing behind the scenes. But Diep can't leave. Not when James doesn't even know she's pregnant. Not when every heartbeat she feels inside her reminds her that she isn't just living for herself anymore. Hours later, nearly 1 in the morning, Diep kneels alone on the cold porch. The moon casts a pale glow over the cracked concrete. The wind bites at her skin, stinging her cheeks like 1,000 tiny needles. Her hair whips wildly around her face, but she doesn't bother to push it back. "Mr. James," she whispers into the empty night. "Wherever you are, run. Stay safe." Her hands tremble as she clasps them together in a desperate, silent prayer. "I don't know if you're okay. I don't know if you're hurt. These days, I feel so uneasy, like my heart is being squeezed tighter and tighter." Her voice breaks. Tears spill freely, dripping onto the ground. "Please, please come back to me, to our baby, to little Nai, who misses you every day." She bows her head deeply, forehead touching the concrete, cold, unforgiving, wet with tears. "I have nothing left but fear and empty hands, but I still believe in you. I still believe you'll come home. The night wind rises, sweeping through the bamboo wind chimes. Each hollow ting-ting echoes like a fragile heartbeat. Diep lifts her face toward the sky, searching for the faintest star. James, if you can hear me, come back. Just come back. I'm not afraid anymore. But her body betrays her. She collapses inward, wrapping her arms around herself as silent sobs shake her thin shoulders. The only answer is the wind. The only company is heartbreak. The next morning arrives pale and cold, with gray clouds stretching low across the sky. Diep wakes before dawn, though she barely slept. Her eyes are swollen, her body heavy, and a dull ache pulses through her lower back, a constant reminder of the life growing inside her. She places a protective hand on her belly, inhaling shakily. Just hold on, she whispers. Mommy won't let anything happen to you. In the kitchen, she moves quietly so as not to wake Nye. She lights the small fire, its flames flickering weakly against the dark. The sound of crackling wood is strangely comforting, a small piece of normalcy in a world that suddenly feels unstable. She pours water into the old clay pot, preparing rice porridge, easy for her stomach, easy for her nerves. But her mind won't stop racing. By the time Nye wakes up, Diep has already cleaned the yard, fed the chickens, and sorted vegetables for the market. Anything to keep her hands busy so her mind doesn't drown in worry. Nye rubs her sleepy eyes, stumbling into Diep's arms. Is Uncle James back yet? Diep kisses her forehead. Not yet, sweetheart. But we'll keep waiting. The lie rests on her tongue like burning coal. She lifts Nye into a chair, sets a bowl of warm porridge in front of her, and forces a smile. Eat so you grow strong. When Uncle James comes back, he'll lift you up to the sky like you love, remember? Nye nods, though the sadness in her eyes betrays her. After breakfast, Diep steps outside to hang laundry in the weak sunlight. She's pinning the final shirt when the sound of footsteps crunches against gravel. She turns sharply. Phat stands near the gate. His clothes are dusty, his shoulders slumped, and dark circles bruise the skin beneath his eyes. He looks nothing like the troublemaker people whisper about. Today, he looks like a man drowning in his own desperation. Diep's heart tightens, but she forces her voice to remain steady. Why are you here again? Phat swallows hard. I need to talk to you. Please. Phat, I already told you. This is different, he interrupts, his voice trembling. He steps closer, wringing his hands as if trying to squeeze courage from his own bones. Please, don't leave yet. Just hear me out. Diep studies him for a long, heavy moment. She sees the fear in his eyes, the guilt etched deep into his face. After a long breath, she nods once and gestures toward the yard. Talk, but be quick. Phat glances toward the house, then lowers his voice. My mom. She's getting worse. The doctors said she needs surgery. Without it, His voice cracks. He bites his lip hard, fighting the tremor in his jaw. I didn't want to take the money, but I had no choice. Diep closes her eyes for a brief second. She knows this pain, knows what it's like to be cornered by life. Phat continues, each word heavier than the last. James's father came to me. He said if I pushed you away, if I made you break up with James, he'd pay for everything, the surgery, the medicine, all of it. A slow, sickening wave washes through Diep. So it was true. The nightmare she tried so hard not to believe. James's father was behind everything. Her knees weaken, but she steadies herself, gripping the clothesline for support. So you threatened me? You followed me home. You scared me half to death. Because his father paid you? Phat's face twists with shame. I know it was wrong. I know I shouldn't have done it. But when someone you love is dying, you'll do anything. Diep's voice is cold as steel. Even ruin someone else's life? Phat flinches as if struck. He drops his gaze. I didn't know you were pregnant, he whispers. I swear, if I had known, maybe. His voice trails off. Diep instinctively wraps her arms around her belly, shielding her unborn child from the world. Phat looks up, eyes red. I can't keep doing this. I can't lie to you anymore. And I can't keep pretending I'm okay with tearing you two apart. Then stop, Diep says quietly. It's not that simple. His voice breaks. I already used the money for part of the hospital deposit. If I stop now, she won't survive. The tension in Diep's chest grows tighter, squeezing her breath. She hates what Phat has done, hates the danger he's brought into her life. But she also sees the raw, suffocating sorrow inside him. James would never want someone's mother to die. And Diep herself, she knows too well the pain of helplessness. Still, she forces her voice to remain steady. You need to tell James the truth. Phat shakes his head violently. I can't, his father said. If I did, if he found out I told you, he'd cut everything off. My mom's treatment would be gone. She doesn't have time. Then what do you expect me to do? Phat's shoulders collapse inward. I don't know. I didn't want you to keep fearing me. I wanted you to know I'm not doing this because I hate you. Diep's stomach twists. She turns away, staring at the distant fields, her heart pounding like a drum. The truth settles like a heavy stone in her chest. James is in Cambodia, unaware of everything happening here. Diep is pregnant, threatened, and utterly alone. And Phat, once just a foolish troublemaker, is now trapped in a cruel bargain. Silence stretches between them, heavy and suffocating. Finally, Phat steps back, voice barely above a whisper. I'm sorry, truly, but please, try to stay away from James, just for now. At least until my mom gets the surgery. After that, I won't bother you again. Diep turns sharply, anger flaring. You're asking me to protect the man who hurt me? No, Phat whispers, shaking his head. I'm asking you to protect my mother. His words hang in the air like a weight. And Diep, who once lost her own family, who knows the pain of helplessness, feels her resolve crumble just slightly. She hates the situation, hates the manipulation, hates being forced into a corner, but she also knows what it means to be someone's last hope. Phat bows low, tears dripping onto the dirt. I'm sorry, he whispers one last time before turning and walking away, shoulders shaking with each step. Diep watches him disappear down the path. Her hands tremble, her heart twisting between anger and compassion. Behind her, Nee's gentle voice drifts from the doorway. Auntie, who was that? Diep wipes her face quickly and turns around with a trembling smile. Just someone asking for directions. She lifts Nee into her arms, holding her close, closer than before, because suddenly she realizes something chilling. Until James comes home, until the truth comes to light, she is the only shield protecting her child, her unborn baby, and the little life they've built.